The night my father sat across the dinner table and slid a manila envelope toward my husband, I knew exactly what was inside. He had that look, the one I'd spent 6 years learning to dread. Chin lifted, shoulders back, the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed he was about to win something. "Go ahead," my father said to Marcus. "Open it." Marcus looked at me first. I gave him nothing. I had stopped giving people things they could use against me a long time ago. He opened the envelope. My father had ordered a home paternity test. He had collected a DNA sample from my 3-year-old daughter Lily, without my knowledge, a cotton swab rubbed inside her cheek while I was in the kitchen making coffee, during what I had believed was a perfectly ordinary Sunday visit. My Aunt Ruth told me later, her voice shaking over the phone. She said she had walked into the living room and seen him do it, and that she hadn't said anything because she was afraid of him. I understood that. I had been afraid of him too, for most of my life. Marcus read the results. The color in his face changed. He set the paper down on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when you don't trust your hands. My father was already smiling. "I've been telling you for 3 years, he said. "That little girl is not a Matthews, and she is certainly not yours." He looked at Marcus when he said it. He always looked at Marcus. That was the thing about my father's cruelty, it was surgical. He never came at me directly in those moments. He went through my husband, planting seeds, watering them, waiting. For 6 years he had been doing this. Since the day I announced I was pregnant, he had been doing this. And for 6 years, some small, exhausted part of Marcus had been listening. I picked up the paper myself. I read every line. Then I put it down and said, very calmly, "This test is wrong." My father laughed. Not a real laugh. A performance for an audience of 2. "Claire." He said my name the way people say obviously. "The science doesn't lie. Home test kits have a documented error rate," I said. "And you collected this sample without my consent, without proper chain of custody, without a certified lab. This paper means nothing." He stopped smiling. "We are going to a certified genetic testing facility," I told him. "And when the results come back, you are going to look at them, and you are going to apologize to me, to Marcus, and most importantly to my daughter." He pushed back from the table. "You're stalling." "I'm correcting you," I said. "There's a difference." I had been correcting him my whole life. He had never once let me be right. "Let me tell you something about my father. Because you need to understand who he is before you can understand what happened next." Robert Matthews was a man who wore his suspicions like a badge. He was suspicious of neighbors, of coworkers, of weather forecasts. He was suspicious of joy. When things went well, he looked for the catch. When people were kind, he looked for the angle. And when I, his only child, the daughter he had raised, the girl who had his last name married a man he hadn't chosen for me and got pregnant within the first year, he looked for the lie. Lily was born in October. She came out with a full head of copper-red hair and gray eyes that later settled into a soft hazel green. She was beautiful and strange and entirely herself, the way all newborns are. My father took one look at her and said, "Where did that hair come from?" I should have known then. I should have recognized the shape of what was coming. But I was 30 years old and exhausted and holding my daughter for the first time, and I actually thought that surely this man, my own father, would look at my baby and feel something other than suspicion. I was wrong. Over the following months, the comments came slow at first. "She doesn't look like Marcus." Then, "She doesn't look like you, either." Then, at Lily's first birthday, when my father had too much to drink and my mother was in the kitchen, he leaned toward Marcus and said, quietly enough that he thought I couldn't hear, "You're a good man, son. Better than she deserves. You should know what kind of woman you married." I walked out of my own daughter's birthday party and sat in my car for 45 minutes. Marcus came to find me. He said my father was drunk. He said it didn't mean anything. I said, "He's been saying some version of this since before she was born. When does it start meaning something to you?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She doesn't really look like either of us, Claire." And there it was. The seed. Fully grown. We didn't fight. Not that night. We were careful people. Marcus and I, we fought quietly, around the edges of things, and we paid for it with years of unresolved distance. but I felt something harden in me that evening. Something that had been soft and open began to close. For the next 2 years, I watched my father work on my husband the way water works on stone. Patient, persistent. He never said the word affair. He never had to. He just kept asking questions he already believed the answers to. And Marcus, who was a good man, a genuinely good man who had been raised to respect his elders and trust his gut slowly, incrementally, started to wonder. I knew he was wondering. Couples know these things. There is a particular kind of looking away that says, I want to believe you, but I'm not sure I do, and Marcus had been doing it for about a year before my father produced that envelope. So when I said we were going to a certified lab, I was not just defending my daughter. I was fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for 6 years of being told that the evidence of my faithfulness, my love, my life, my own child was somehow a forgery. We went to a clinical genetics lab the following Thursday, a certified facility, court-admissible results, full chain of custody. Marcus and I went together. We brought a photograph of Lily because the technician asked if we wanted to add a pediatric sample, and we had decided, the night before, sitting at the kitchen table long after Lily was asleep, that we wanted to do this completely. No gaps. No room for another envelope. The technician was a young woman named Dr. Patel. She had calm hands and an efficient way of explaining things that I found steadying. She told us results would be back in 7 to 10 business days. It was the longest 10 days of my life. I went to work. I picked Lily up from daycare. I made dinner. I watched Marcus watching me across the kitchen, trying to figure out what he believed, and I let him watch, because I had nothing to hide, and I was done pretending otherwise. My father called twice during those 10 days. I let both calls go to voicemail. My mother texted, "Your father is just concerned." I stared at that message for a long time before I put my phone face down on the counter and went to read to my daughter. The results came on a Tuesday afternoon. Dr. Patel's office called and asked if we could come in. I remember thinking that was strange. They didn't mail the results. They didn't email them. Marcus drove. Neither of us spoke. Lily was at my mother-in-law's house, Marcus's mother, a woman who had never once questioned her granddaughter, and the car felt very empty without her. Dr. Patel met us in a small consultation room. She had a folder on the table. She was kind, precise, and careful in the way that people are careful when they are about to tell you something that will change the shape of your life. "The paternity results are conclusive," she said. "Marcus is Lily's biological father, unambiguous match. 99.9% probability." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 6 years. Marcus put his face in his hands. Dr. Patel gave us a moment. Then she said, "There is something else in the results I need to discuss with you." I looked up. "We ran a standard panel," she said, "which includes a maternity confirmation as a baseline. This is routine." She paused. She opened the folder. "Claire, the results indicate that you are not a biological match to the family markers your father provided when he submitted his original home test." I didn't understand what she was saying. Not at first. That was a home test," I said. "You said those are unreliable." "In terms of your paternity results, yes, they are often unreliable, but this is a different finding." She looked at me steadily. "We were able to cross-reference the DNA profile your father submitted, which does appear to be his own against your profile. Claire, Robert Matthews is not your biological father." The room was very quiet. "And your mother?" she continued. "Based on family markers, the probability is extremely low that Sandra Matthews is your biological mother either." Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. I was 31 years old, sitting in a genetics lab, and I had just learned that the man who had spent 6 years calling my daughter a lie was not my father, that the woman who had spent 6 years not protecting me was not my mother, that I was in some biological, foundational sense not who I had believed myself to be. "How is that possible?" I heard myself ask. Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, carefully, "There are a few explanations. But given your age and the complete non-match on both parental lines, the most likely scenario is a birth hospital mix-up." I looked at her. "A switched-at-birth situation," she said. "It's rare, but it does happen, and when it does, it typically involves 2 families, which meant somewhere out there was another woman, 31 years old, copper red hair and gray eyes, and no idea why she didn't look like anyone in her family. I didn't call my father that night. I sat on the bathroom floor of our house at 11 o'clock with my back against the tub. And I thought about every single year of my life in terms of this new information. Every holiday photo, where I looked slightly off from everyone else. Every time a teacher had said, "You must take after a different side." Every time my father had looked at me with that specific quality of doubt. Not just since Lily was born, but further back for as long as I could actually remember. And I thought, he always knew something was wrong. Not what, not exactly, but he had always felt it, the way suspicious people feel everything as evidence of their suspicions. And he had taken that feeling out on me for 31 years. Marcus came and found me. He sat down on the bathroom floor next to me, our backs against the tub, and he didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" He said, "For wondering. Even for a minute. I should never have wondered." I leaned my head against his shoulder. I was too tired to be gracious about it, but I took his hand. "We have to find out who I actually am," I said. He squeezed my fingers. "Then we find out." The search started with the hospital. I was born at Mercy General, a regional hospital in the mid-sized Ohio city where my parents had lived before moving to Columbus when I was 4. Mercy General had since been absorbed into a larger health system, but the records existed. I hired a patient advocate, a woman who specialized in exactly this kind of search, and within 3 weeks, she had confirmed what Dr. Patel suspected. On the night I was born, there had been 2 infant girls delivered within 2 hours of each other. Both were taken to the central nursery. Both were brunette. Newborn hair is a poor indicator, as it often sheds within weeks, and both were roughly the same weight. There was a staffing shortage that night. There were notations in a supervisor's log about a labeling error that was caught and corrected, except, apparently, it hadn't been fully corrected, or it had been corrected in reverse. Somewhere in that log was the name of the nurse on duty. Her name was Patricia Olson. She was 67 years old, retired, and living in a suburb of Dayton. She was 67. I checked this twice, because the original video that had inspired me to look more closely at my own situation had a nurse who was supposedly 72 years old, despite the math not working. I refused to let my own story have that kind of error. Patricia Olson was 67. I was 31. She had been 26 the night I was born. The math worked. My patient advocate made contact first. Patricia Olson said she didn't know what we were talking about. She said the records were 31 years old and she remembered nothing. Then I called her myself. I said, "My name is Claire. I was born at Mercy General on October 14th. I was the baby in room 4 of the nursery. I have the genetic results. I have the hospital log. I have the notation about the labeling correction that wasn't fully completed. I'm not calling to threaten you, Patricia. I'm calling because there is another family out there, a woman my age, and her parents who have spent 31 years not knowing their real daughter. And I need to find her." There was a very long silence. Then Patricia Olson said, very quietly, "I've been waiting for this call for a long time." She told me she had realized the mistake within 24 hours. She had been a 26-year-old new nurse, terrified, and her supervisor had told her directly, that by the time they caught it, both babies had been taken home, and that correcting the paperwork error was the better option than pulling 2 newborns from their families and creating a scandal that would destroy the hospital. She had been told it was handled. She had been told to say nothing. She had said nothing for 31 years. She started crying about halfway through the conversation. I let her cry. I did not comfort her, but I did not punish her either. She was a 67-year-old woman who had been carrying something impossible since she was 26. And whatever I felt about that, and I felt a great deal about it, she was also the person who was going to help me find the other family. She remembered their name. Her name was Emma Hargrove. She was 31 years old, a high school art teacher, married to a man named Joel, and the mother of an 18-month-old son. She had brown eyes and dark hair. She had spent her whole life wondering why. In a family of redheads, her parents, her 3 siblings, everyone on both sides, she was the one who looked like she'd come from somewhere else. Her mother had never said anything unkind about it. Her father had never questioned her. They had simply loved her, completely and without conditions, and in doing so, had given her something I had not had, a childhood without doubt. I found that out later. I'm getting ahead of myself. My patient advocate tracked down Emma's parents through the hospital records. Her mother's name was Diane Hargrove, and when my advocate called her and explained, in careful and measured terms, what the genetic testing had revealed, Diane Hargrove was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "I always thought she was my daughter." My advocate said, "She is your daughter, in every way that matters," Diane said. "But there's another girl." "Yes, our girl." Our. Her voice broke. She couldn't finish. My advocate told her about me. Before I met the Hargroves, I had to do the thing I had been waiting to do since I sat on that bathroom floor. I called my father. I didn't go to his house. I didn't write a letter. I picked up the phone and I called him, and when he answered with that particular tone he always used with me, cautious, slightly contemptuous, braced for something to be my fault, I said, "I have the certified results from the genetics lab. And? Lily is Marcus's daughter. 100%. Court admissible. Certified chain of custody." I paused. "You were wrong." He was quiet. "But that's not all the results said," I continued. "They also showed that you are not my biological father, and Sandra is not my biological mother." Another silence. Longer. "I was switched at birth," I said. "The hospital made a mistake 31 years ago, and I went home with the wrong family." I heard him exhale. "What I need you to understand," I said, "is that somewhere in the back of your mind, some part of you has always sensed this. And instead of looking into it, instead of asking questions, or protecting me, or simply loving me anyway, you spent 31 years treating your doubts like they were my fault. You made your own daughter's childhood a referendum on whether she deserved to exist in your family. And now we know why she always seemed like she didn't fit. It wasn't because she was bad. It wasn't because her mother was unfaithful. It was because she wasn't yours. And none of it was ever her fault." I heard him make a sound I had never heard from him before. Not quite crying. Something smaller and more broken than crying. "I have nothing else to say to you right now," I told him. "My attorney will be in touch about the hospital's liability. I'm going to go meet my real family." I hung up. I sat in my car for a moment. My hands were shaking. Then I started the engine and drove to meet the Hargroves. Diane Hargrove opened the door before I even knocked. She was 62 years old, with copper-red hair gone mostly silver and gray-green eyes that were the same shape as mine, and when she saw me standing on her porch, she put both hands over her mouth and made a sound that was not a word in any language, just a sound, the kind that comes from somewhere below speech. I had promised myself I would hold it together. I did not hold it together. She pulled me through the door and held me the way my mother Sandra had never once held me, with her whole body, both arms, her chin on top of my head, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, you look exactly like my grandmother." I cried in a stranger's doorway. Her husband, Tom, stood a few feet back with his arms crossed tight over his chest, not because he was closed off, but because he was trying very hard not to fall apart himself. He was a tall man with dark eyes and a quiet kind of steadiness about him, and when Diane finally stepped back and he got a clear look at my face, he said, "There she is," very softly. "There she is." Emma was there too. She was standing in the hallway behind her parents, holding her baby son on her hip. She had dark hair and brown eyes and cheekbones that I recognized as her father Tom's, and she looked at me with an expression I can only describe as recognition, the kind you feel when you see something you've been looking for without knowing you were looking for it. We stood there for a moment, the two of us, measuring each other. Then she said, "You're taller than I expected." I laughed. Genuinely laughed. For the first time in what felt like weeks. She crossed the hallway and hugged me with her free arm, her son wedged cheerfully between us, and she said quietly, "I'm sorry about your family. I'm sorry about what your father did to you." I pulled back. "How do you know about that?" She gave me a steady look. "My mom talked to your patient advocate, and also," she hesitated, "I've been reading about switched at birth cases, preparing myself. In almost every one family has a harder time than the other. One set of parents loves unconditionally, the other," She stopped. I got the better draw. That's not fair, and I know it. I thought about Tom Hargrove saying there she is in that gentle, certain voice. I thought about growing up with that voice. I thought about what I might have become with that voice. I let myself feel that for exactly 30 seconds. Then I set it down. You didn't get the better draw, I told Emma. We got different draws, and I'm going to be okay. She looked at me like she was deciding whether to believe me. Really? I said. She nodded slowly. Okay. Her son grabbed a fistful of my hair. We both laughed. In the months that followed, the pieces arranged themselves slowly, the way things do when the change is real and lasting rather than dramatic. Marcus and I filed a civil suit against the hospital system. Our attorney was very good. Theirs was very expensive. We settled 14 months later, and I will not tell you the amount. But I will tell you that Lily's college education is fully funded, and there is a patient safety fund established in the name of both families that pays for additional staffing in maternity wards. I am told it has already prevented 2 near misses. That matters to me more than the money. Patricia Olson cooperated fully with the legal proceedings. She was not charged with any crime. The statute of limitations had long since passed, and the decision to cover up the error had been made above her pay grade by people who were now retired or dead. She wrote me a letter, handwritten, 4 pages. I have read it twice. I may read it again someday. I have not decided. My father, Robert Matthews, did not attend any of the legal proceedings. He had nothing to attend. He was not a party to the suit. He called twice in the first month after our phone call. I did not answer. He sent a card. It said, "I'm sorry," and nothing else. I am not sure what that means to me yet. I am not sure it has to mean anything right now. Sandra, my mother, the woman who raised me, called me separately. She cried for a long time and said she had always loved me. I believe that's true. I also believe that love, without the courage to protect someone, is a smaller thing than it means to be. We are still figuring out what we are to each other. Some days that feels possible, some days it doesn't. I think that's honest. The Hargroves made room for me the way people make room when they've been waiting for something without knowing they were waiting. Diane texts me, recipes. Tom calls every other Sunday and asks about Lily in the specific way of grandfathers who have decided, completely without fanfare, that a child is theirs. Lily calls him Pop Pop Tom. The first time she did it, he went very quiet on the phone, and I heard him clear his throat twice before he could speak again. Emma and I talk most weeks. She is teaching me to paint, which I am genuinely terrible at, and I am teaching her to run, which she is also genuinely terrible at, and we are slowly, carefully, building something that doesn't have a name yet, because it doesn't need one. She is not my sister in any way the law would recognize. She is something else, something that fits in the specific shaped space that was always empty. Her son's name is Oliver. He has my copper red hair, Diane cried the first time she saw it. I used to think that the truth was something you arrived at. A destination. You fought your way through the lies and the doubts and the people who needed you to be wrong, and eventually you got to the truth, and then you were done. I know better now. The truth was not the destination. The DNA results were not the ending. They were the door. What waited behind the door was not simple. It was not clean. It was a 67-year-old woman sobbing on the phone, and a father I loved who had failed me in ways I am still measuring, and a mother who wept over a card instead of a conversation, and a man who opened a door and said, "There she is," in a voice that broke something open in my chest I didn't know had been closed. It was my daughter, sitting on the floor of the Hargrove living room, the first time I brought her there, looking up at Diane's copper hair, and then looking at mine and saying, with the satisfied authority of a 3-year-old, "Grandma has the same hair as Mama." Diane looked at me over Lily's head. I looked back. Neither of us trusted ourselves to speak. For 6 years, a man with no biological connection to me used a child's hair color as ammunition. And now here was my daughter, Marcus's daughter, 100% confirmed, no asterisk, no caveat pointing to the hair she inherited from me and accidentally tracing it all the way back to where it actually came from. The red hair did not come from nowhere. It came from here. It always came from here. I just had to find my way back.